Welcome to AI 103 Practice Exam, Information Extraction Solutions. This focused set contains 20 original questions covering Azure Content Understanding, Azure AI Search Ingestion and Retrieval, document cracking, OCR, layout, structured fields, source grounding, private connectivity, and production extraction decisions. Use each question to practice the design and implementation choices you will need on exam day. Here is how this practice exam works. First, read the complete scenario and every response. Next, lock in your answer. You will have 3 silent seconds to commit, and you can pause the video whenever you need more thinking time. Then, I will reveal the correct response. Finally, I will explain why it works and reinforce the exam pattern. If this practice helps, like the video and subscribe to WebLizard Cert Lab for the next AI 103 set. Question 1. A team is implementing invoice extraction with Azure Content Understanding. The invoices include scanned text. The spatial structure must be retained, and extracted values must conform to named typed fields. Which current GA Document Analyzer configuration should the team use? A. Use the 2025-1101 GA API and define one document analyzer with enable OCR and field schema. Omit enable layout because typed fields preserve spatial structure automatically. B. Use the 2025-1101 GA API and define one document analyzer that includes enable OCR, enable layout, and field schema. C. Use the 2025-1101 GA API and define one document analyzer with enable OCR and enable layout. Omit field schema because the analyzer creates named typed invoice fields automatically. D. Use the 2025-1101 GA API and define one document analyzer with enable layout and field schema. Omit enable OCR because layout analysis reads scanned text automatically. Lock in your answer. Correct response, B. Use the 2025-1101 GA API and define one document analyzer that includes enable OCR, enable layout, and field schema. Why this works. The documented custom invoice analyzer places enable OCR, enable layout, and field schema in one analyzer definition. The current GA API is 2025-1101. The legacy 2024-1201 preview and 2025-0501 preview APIs are retired. OCR and layout are document analyzer settings and should not be transferred unchanged to other content types. Exam pattern. Choose the GA document analyzer design that jointly satisfies OCR, layout, and field extraction. Question 2. A team uses Azure Content Understanding to analyze a policy library. The downstream reasoning workflow retrieves passages by heading and table context, and the team has no stable business field schema. The application must also parse the normal API response contract. Which analyzer output design should the team implement? A. Configure Markdown output, then read contents.fields because Markdown replaces the JSON response envelope. B. Configure segments as the output structure, then treat the entire REST response body as raw Markdown. C. Define only JSON fields for selected policy attributes, then use contents.fields as the retrieval representation. D. Configure Markdown for search and retrieval, then read contents.markdown from the structured JSON result. Lock in your answer. Correct response, D. Configure Markdown for search and retrieval, then read contents.markdown from the structured JSON result. Why this works. Azure Content Understanding can produce Markdown for search and retrieval, and its API returns that representation inside the Markdown property of a contents entry in a structured JSON result. JSON fields remain a distinct schema-oriented output contract. Exam pattern. Choose the analyzer output and response property for structure-preserving downstream retrieval when no fixed field schema exists. Question 3. A Microsoft Foundry project already has an Azure AI Search index that contains support articles. An agent in the project must query that index directly as a tool. Which configuration should you implement? A. Provide only the Azure AI Search service endpoint and let the agent infer the project connection and index. B. Copy the support articles into the agent instructions and omit any Azure AI Search project connection. C. Bind Azure AI Search tool to the project search connection by setting project connection ID and index name. D. Create a Logic Apps indexing workflow and expose the workflow run history as the agent retrieval tool. Lock in your answer. Correct response, C. Bind Azure AI Search tool to the project search connection by setting project connection ID and index name. Why this works? The Foundry Azure AI Search agent tool requires an Azure AI Search connection in the project. Its tool definition identifies the project connection, target index, and query type. Project connection ID and index name are required parameters. Exam pattern. Configure a Foundry agent to query an existing Azure AI Search index directly. Question 4. Fabricam is building a procurement knowledge agent. Supplier manuals arrive as born digital files and scanned PDFs. Azure AI Search will host the RAG index. A Logic Apps workflow must move supported source documents into that index, and a Microsoft Foundry agent must query the same private Azure AI Search service. Invoice documents must also be analyzed by Azure Content Understanding, so downstream reasoning can use readable markdown and selected structured fields with source grounding. For content understanding, the team will use the current 2025-11 GA API and will not use retired preview APIs. Delta. The ingestion team must assign each processing responsibility to the Azure AI Search mechanism that performs it. Requirements. 1. Extract base text and embedded images from source documents. 2. Recognize text contained in cracked images from scanned PDFs. 3. Chunk content and generate vector representations during indexing. 4. Persist enrichment results in searchable destination index fields. Available targets. A. Have the indexer invoke a chunking and vectorization skill set. B. Use document cracking in the indexer. C. Apply OCR in a skill set to cracked document images. D. Map skill outputs to fields in the destination search index. Lock in your answer. Correct response. 1. Extract base text and embedded images from source documents. Matches use document cracking in the indexer. 2. Recognize text contained in cracked images from scanned PDFs. Matches apply OCR in a skill set to cracked document images. 3. Chunk content and generate vector representations during indexing. Matches have the indexer invoke a chunking and vectorization skill set. 4. Persist enrichment results in searchable destination index fields. Matches map skill outputs to fields in the destination search index. Why this works? Document cracking extracts source text and images. OCR is then applied to cracked images. An indexer-invoked skill set can chunk content and generate vectors, and skill outputs are mapped into destination index fields. Exam pattern. Map 4 ingestion responsibilities to their proper Azure AI Search stages. Question 5. You configure an Azure AI Search indexer and skill set to prepare scanned PDF documents for a classic RAG solution. Arrange the processing actions from initial document processing through population of the destination index. Arrange all 5 steps in the correct order. A. Apply OCR in the skill set to the cracked document images. B. Map the skill outputs to fields in the destination search index. C. Crack each source document to extract its text and images. D. Generate vector representations for the chunks. E. Subdivide the resulting document content into RAG chunks. Lock in your answer. Correct response. Step 1. Crack each source document to extract its text and images. Step 2. Apply OCR in the skill set to the cracked document images. Step 3. Subdivide the resulting document content into RAG chunks. Step 4. Generate vector representations for the chunks. Step 5. Map the skill outputs to fields in the destination search index. Why this works. The indexer first cracks each source document. The skill set can then apply OCR to the cracked images, divide the resulting content into chunks, generate vector representations, and map the produced outputs to destination index fields. Exam pattern. Order the Azure AI Search indexing stages that turn scanned PDFs into OCR-enriched, chunked, vectorized RAG index content. Question 6. Fabricam is building a procurement knowledge agent. Supplier manuals arrive as born digital files and scanned PDFs. Azure AI Search will host the RAG index. A Logic Apps workflow must move supported source documents into that index, and a Microsoft Foundry agent must query the same private Azure AI Search service. Invoice documents must also be analyzed by Azure Content Understanding, so downstream reasoning can use readable markdown and selected structured fields with source grounding. For content understanding, the team will use the current 2025-1101 GA API and will not use retired preview APIs. Delta. The team must connect both the Logic Apps workflow and the Foundry agent to the private search service without relying on the preview import data wizard path, which does not support private endpoints. Select 3 actions. A. Use a standard agent with virtual network injection and Microsoft Entra project managed identity for private search. B. Configure the Foundry search tool with both project connection ID and index name. C. Configure one Azure AI Search tool instance to switch dynamically among all procurement indexes. D. Use a standard Logic Apps workflow with the built-in service provider Azure AI Search connector. E. Use a consumption workflow with the managed Azure AI Search connector and API key access to the private service. F. Keep a basic agent deployment and connect to the private search service by using a search API key. Lock in your answer. Correct response, A. Use a standard agent with virtual network injection and Microsoft Entra project managed identity for private search. B. Configure the Foundry search tool with both project connection ID and index name. D. Use a standard Logic Apps workflow with the built-in service provider Azure AI Search connector. Why this works. The standard Logic Apps built-in connector is the documented path with direct access to Azure Virtual Network resources. The Foundry tool identifies a project connection and one index. Private search requires a standard agent with virtual network injection and Microsoft Entra project managed identity. Key authentication is not supported for that private network path. Exam pattern. Choose direct workflow and agent tool connection mechanisms for a private Azure AI Search service. Question 7. A grounding query must retrieve documents that contain an exact product code and documents that describe the same concept without using that code. Which Azure AI Search request should you configure? A. A full text request in search with vector queries omitted, so only exact lexical matches are ranked. B. A hybrid request with full text in search and one or more vector queries in vector queries. C. A vector-only request in vector queries with search omitted, so product code text is not queried. D. A semantic configuration update without a full text query or a vector query in the request. Lock in your answer. Correct response, B, a hybrid request with full text in search and one or more vector queries in vector queries. Why this works. An Azure AI Search hybrid request contains both full text and vector queries. In the documented request shape, search carries the full text expression, and vector queries carries one or more vector queries. Exam pattern. Select the request shape that combines lexical precision with conceptual similarity for grounding. Question 8. An Azure AI Search request contains both full text and vector queries and sets query type to semantic. Telemetry shows both retrieval paths complete before semantic scoring. An engineer claims that semantic ranker then runs a new search across the entire corpus. Which interpretation is correct? A. Semantic ranker runs before keyword retrieval and leaves the vector result set as a separate unmerged list. B. Semantic ranker searches the full corpus first, after which keyword and vector scores are merged by RRF. C. Run keyword and vector retrieval in parallel, merge with RRF, then semantically re-rank the existing top 50 results. D. Semantic ranker replaces both retrieval paths and performs the only corpus-wide retrieval for the request. Lock in your answer. Correct response, C. Run keyword and vector retrieval in parallel, merge with RRF, then semantically re-rank the existing top 50 results. Why this works. For a hybrid request, Azure AI Search runs full text and vector retrieval in parallel and merges the result sets with reciprocal rank fusion. Query type equals semantic invokes semantic ranker, which re-ranks the existing top 50 results rather than rerunning the query across the corpus. Exam pattern. Diagnose the execution order and scope of semantic re-ranking in an Azure AI Search hybrid query. Question 9. An application writes records to a cloud data source, and the corresponding Azure AI Search index must reflect every update within 2 minutes. Which ingestion design should you implement? A. Run an indexer every 5 minutes and enable semantic ranker to reduce the ingestion delay. B. Use a push model that writes each update to both the external data source and Azure AI Search. C. Schedule an Azure AI Search indexer to run every 2 minutes against the cloud data source. D. Trigger an on-demand Azure AI Search indexer after every record is written to the cloud data source. Lock in your answer. Correct response, B. Use a push model that writes each update to both the external data source and Azure AI Search. Why this works. Azure AI Search indexers can run on demand or on a recurring schedule, as often as every 5 minutes. A 2-minute update requirement is more frequent than that boundary, so the application must use a push model that sends updates to both Azure AI Search and the external data source. Exam pattern. Choose between pull/indexer ingestion and push ingestion for a 2-minute freshness requirement. Question 10. A solution uses the Azure Content Understanding 2025-11-01 GA API to process invoices. An agent needs schema-aligned vendor and total values with confidence and source grounding for decisions. The same analyzed content must also supply a retrieval representation for a RAG index. Which design should you implement? A. Use grounded schema fields for the agent and markdown for RAG set estimate field, source, and confidence to true. B. Use markdown for agent decisions and assume every field receives confidence and grounding without opt-in configuration. C. Use schema matching JSON as the only RAG representation and treat the separate markdown property as redundant. D. Define schema fields, leave estimate field source and confidence false, and infer field grounding from the markdown text. Lock in your answer. Correct response. A. Use grounded schema fields for the agent and markdown for RAG set estimate field, source, and confidence to true. Why this works. For the agent, define schema-aligned fields and opt in to confidence and grounding with estimate field, source, and confidence equals true. For the RAG path, use the markdown retrieval representation. The structured result exposes markdown and fields as separate properties. Exam pattern. Design one content understanding analysis contract for an auditable agent decision path and a RAG retrieval path. You are halfway through the practice exam. Reset your attention. Keep document cracking. OCR. Layout. Chunking. Vectorization. Typed fields. Grounding. And private connectivity boundaries clear. And verify the exact mechanism each requirement needs. Question 11. An Azure AI Search RAG index must create one ordered chunk stream for each document. Text recognized from an embedded diagram must occur in the same local chunk as the adjacent native paragraph according to the diagram's position. The indexer already produces /document/content, normalized image OCR text, and a content offset for each image. Which two skill set changes are required? Select two answers. A. At normalized image scope, insert the full native document into each OCR result, then split only the unchanged document content for embedding. B. Project native content and OCR output to sibling fields, then run text split and embeddings independently over each field before indexing both chunk streams. C. Split native content and OCR output on separate paths, generate vectors for both paths, and map both vector sets to the same parent document. D. At document scope, insert OCR text into native content using each image content offset, and write the resulting ordered text to merged text. E. Use merged text as the text split source, then generate embeddings from the chunk output rather than from either original text path. Lock in your answer. Correct response. D. At document scope, insert OCR text into native content using each image content offset and write the resulting ordered text to merge text. E. Use merge text as the text split source, then generate embeddings from the chunk output rather than from either original text path. Why this works. The required output is one position-aware text stream, not two independently searchable streams. At document scope, MergeSkill can insert normalized image OCR text into native content by using each image's content offset and omit merge text. Text split must then consume merge text, and the embedding skill must consume the resulting chunks. Those two changes ensure that nearby native and image-derived text can occur in the same ordered chunk sequence. Exam pattern. Construct the two necessary ingestion stages that produce position-aware chunks containing both native and OCR-derived text. Question 12. A content understanding document analyzer has two fields. Clause text must reproduce the complete governing clause verbatim for an audit record. Renewal risk summary may synthesize evidence found across several clauses. Neither field currently defines method. Which field schema treatment meets both requirements while avoiding an unnecessary constraint? A. Omit method for clause text, set method to generate for renewal risk summary. B. Set method to extract for clause text, set method to extract for renewal risk summary. C. Set method to generate for clause text, set method to extract for renewal risk summary. D. Set method to extract for clause text, omit method for renewal risk summary. Lock in your answer. Correct response D. Set method to extract for clause text, omit method for renewal risk summary. Why this works. The audit field has a strict verbatim requirement, so its field definition should set method to extract. The risk summary should remain available for the analyzer to derive from the document, so its method should be omitted. Current GA migration guidance says that an omitted method lets the analyzer choose extract or generate, and that method should be added when a value must be extracted verbatim. Exam pattern. Apply field-level method semantics to preserve one value verbatim without preventing another field from using analyzer-selected derivation. Question 13. An Azure AI Search enrichment pipeline processes contracts that contain headings, tables, and images. The index must receive a markdown representation that preserves document structure. Which skill set configuration should you use? A. Use a custom web API skill with arbitrary external code and omit a layout model skill from the skill set. B. Use only an OCR skill and map its plain extracted text directly to a markdown output field. C. Use semantic ranker as an enrichment skill and configure it to emit markdown document during indexing. D. Use Microsoft.skills.util.document intelligence layout skill with file data input and markdown document output. Lock in your answer. Correct response, D. Use Microsoft.skills.util.document intelligence layout skill with file data input and markdown document output. Why this works? Use the Azure AI Search document layout skill. Its @OData type is Microsoft.skills.util.document intelligence layout skill. And the documented markdown configuration uses file data as input and markdown document as output. The skill uses the Azure Document Intelligence layout model to detect document structure. Exam pattern. Select and configure the built-in enrichment skill that preserves contract structure as markdown. Question 14. A finance team uses Azure Content Understanding 2025-11-01 GA to process invoice PDFs. Governance permits exactly one analyzer definition and one analyzer call per invoice, and the downstream consumer accepts that analyzer result directly without a result merging stage. The output must include printed text, preserved document layout, and vendor name and invoice total as schema-defined fields. Which analyzer design should the team implement? A. Create one document analyzer that returns markdown but omits field schema for the two required fields. B. Create one audio analyzer and apply the document OCR and layout settings to the invoice files. C. Create separate document analyzers for OCR, layout, and field extraction, then merge their results. D. Create one document analyzer that enables OCR and layout and defines both fields in field schema. Lock in your answer. Correct response, D. Create one document analyzer that enables OCR and layout and defines both fields in field schema. Why this works? Under the one definition, one call, no merge constraint, a single content understanding document analyzer must contain enable OCR, enable layout, and field schema together. This applies OCR, layout analysis, and the two structured fields on the current 2025-11-01 GA path. Document OCR and layout settings should not be transferred to an audio analyzer. Exam pattern. Select a current Content Understanding document analyzer definition that combines all required outputs while satisfying an explicit single analyzer execution constraint. Question 15. Fabricam's Invoice Analyzer processes scanned supplier documents for two consumers. A reasoning service needs a readable document rendering, while an audit service needs typed fields with confidence and source grounding. The implementation uses Content Understanding GA API version 2025-11-01. Which three choices establish the analyzer and result contract? Select three implementation choices. A. Keep OCR and layout extraction enabled. Then read markdown and fields from the structured JSON result. B. Set estimate field source and confidence to true, so the GA result includes optional confidence and grounding. C. Set table format to Markdown and use the formatted tables as the document-level reasoning output in place of layout extraction. D. Define the audit field names, types, and extraction behavior in the analyzer's field schema. E. Leave field schema empty and derive the typed audit fields from the downstream database schema during analysis. F. Run one analysis for Markdown and a second analysis for fields because a contents entry carries one representation. Lock in your answer. Correct response A. Keep OCR and layout extraction enabled, then read Markdown and fields from the structured JSON result. B. Set estimate field source and confidence to true so the GA result includes optional confidence and grounding. D. Define the audit field names, types, and extraction behavior in the analyzer's field schema. Why this works. For scanned documents, OCR and layout extraction supply readable document structure. The structured JSON analysis result can carry Markdown and fields in the same contents entry. Field schema defines the typed extraction contract, and the 2025-1101 GA API adds field confidence and grounding when estimate field source and confidence is true. Table format does not replace document layout, and a downstream database schema does not configure analyzer fields. Exam pattern. Configure one document analyzer and consume its dual rendering and field result without confusing table formatting or downstream storage with extraction. Question 16. An Azure AI Search index contains equipment manuals. A grounding query must preserve exact model number matches, find conceptually related repair procedures when terminology differs, and then semantically re-rank the combined result set. The team will use query time integrated vectorization. Which three configurations should the team implement? Select three answers. A. Use semantic ranker as the first stage retrieval mechanism instead of keyword and vector retrieval. B. Define a semantic configuration and submit the hybrid request with query type set to semantic. C. Assign a matching vectorizer through a vector profile to the target vector field. D. Put the full text query in search and include a text-based vector query in vector queries. E. Configure semantic ranker to rerun the request against the entire corpus after hybrid retrieval. F. Omit the full text search value because vector similarity also guarantees exact model number precision. Lock in your answer. Correct response. B. Define a semantic configuration and submit the hybrid request with query type set to semantic. C. Assign a matching vectorizer through a vector profile to the target vector field. D. Put the full text query in search and include a text-based vector query in vector queries. Why this works. The hybrid request needs both search and vector queries. Query time vectorization requires a vectorizer assigned through a vector profile to the vector field. Semantic ranking additionally requires a semantic configuration and query type equals semantic. Semantic ranker re-ranks the existing top 50 BM25 or RRF results. It neither replaces first stage retrieval nor reruns the query over the full corpus. Exam pattern. Configure all three retrieval and ranking layers for a grounding workload that needs lexical precision, conceptual recall, and semantic re-ranking. Question 17. A policy system pre-processes each changed document and must make updates searchable in Azure AI Search within 2 minutes. The source can notify the application immediately when a document changes. Which ingestion design meets the freshness requirement? A. Use the push API to send each pre-processed document update when the application receives the change notification. B. Run an indexer every 5 minutes and add semantic ranking to reduce ingestion delay. C. Configure an Azure AI Search indexer to run on a recurring 2-minute schedule. D. Create a knowledge base so agentic retrieval performs the document updates during each query. Lock in your answer. Correct response. A. Use the push API to send each pre-processed document update when the application receives the change notification. Why this works. Azure AI Search indexers can run on a recurring schedule as often as every 5 minutes. A workload that requires updates more frequently than every 5 minutes needs the push model. Because the application already pre-processes the content and receives immediate change notifications, it can push each update to the index. Exam pattern. Choose push ingestion rather than a pull indexer when the required update frequency is below the documented indexer schedule floor. Question 18. Packing slips arrive as scans and digital PDFs with supplier-specific layouts. Compliance requires one Content Understanding analyzer to retain document structure and return typed vendor ID, purchase order number, and line items fields. Which analyzer definition should the team deploy? A. Base a custom analyzer on pre-built document, place the typed fields in the downstream index schema, and reuse the analyzer output as is. B. Base a custom analyzer on pre-built document, define the typed fields in field schema, and disable content extraction for scanned inputs. C. Run pre-built document directly, attach the typed field definitions to each analyze request, and avoid maintaining a custom analyzer. D. Base a custom analyzer on pre-built document, define the typed fields in field schema, and keep document content extraction active. E. Generate a proposed field schema from samples, then use that utility result as the analyzer that processes production documents. Lock in your answer. Correct response. D. Base a custom analyzer on pre-built document, define the typed fields in field schema, and keep document content extraction active. Why this works. A custom analyzer based on pre-built document can retain the OCR and layout-derived document content, while field schema defines the typed business fields to extract. A downstream index schema does not configure analyzer extraction. A proposed schema is not a production analyzer, and per-request field declarations do not replace the documented custom analyzer definition. Scanned inputs still require content extraction. Exam pattern. Distinguish the analyzer's extraction contract from adjacent storage, schema proposal, and request time configurations. Question 19. An Azure AI Search enrichment pipeline already cracks legal documents and extracts their text and images. The team must add proprietary citation normalization logic that is not covered by a built-in skill, and must execute the team's own code. Which enrichment mechanism should the team add? A. Place the proprietary code inside the search service so the indexer executes it as a built-in skill. B. Add a custom skill that invokes the team's externally executing code through the custom skill web interface. C. Add the built-in text translation skill and use translated text as normalized citations. D. Add the built-in OCR skill and treat the OCR output as normalized legal citations. Lock in your answer. Correct response. B. Add a custom skill that invokes the team's externally executing code through the custom skill web interface. Why this works. Built-in Azure AI Search skills use Foundry tools, whereas custom skills supply externally executing code through the custom skill web interface. Because the required proprietary logic is not covered by a built-in skill, a custom skill preserves the correct execution boundary. Exam pattern. Choose a custom enrichment mechanism when proprietary logic requires team-owned external code after document cracking. Question 20. A team is implementing a document analyzer on the Azure Content Understanding 2025-11-01 GA API. Different downstream components have distinct output and operation requirements. Requirements. 1. Give the retrieval system a hierarchy-aware representation suitable for chunking and citation. 2. Provide an accounts payable workflow with predictable named values and data types. 3. Let reviewers judge how strongly each value is supported and locate its origin in the document. 4. Accept a remote file even though processing continues beyond the lifetime of the initial request. Available targets. A. Use result.contents *markdown as the accounts payable contract without defining fields. B. Send the URL to analyze, retain the operation location response header, and query that URL until completion. C. Enable estimate field source and confidence on the analyzer. D. Use result.contents *markdown as the retrieval input. E. Configure field schema and pass result.contents *fields to the workflow. Lock in your answer. Correct response. 1. Give the retrieval system a hierarchy-aware representation suitable for chunking and citation. Matches. Use result.contents *markdown as the retrieval input. 2. Provide an accounts payable workflow with predictable name values and data types. Matches. Configure field schema and pass result.contents *fields to the workflow. 3. Let reviewers judge how strongly each value is supported and locate its origin in the document. Matches. Enable estimate field source and confidence on the analyzer. 4. Accept a remote file even though processing continues beyond the lifetime of the initial request. Matches. Send the URL to analyze, retain the operation location response header, and query that URL until completion. Why this works. Content Understanding supports distinct downstream representations and operation controls. Markdown supports search and retrieval, while Field Schema produces schema matching fields for automation. In 2025 Dividable GA, Estimate Field Source and Confidence enables optional confidence and grounding. URL analysis is asynchronous. Submit to analyze and poll the returned operation location. Exam pattern. Map 4 downstream needs to distinct content understanding output, field evidence, and asynchronous operation mechanisms without relying on lexical identity. You completed AI-103 practice exam, Information Extraction Solutions, and the 8th focused video in this series. Review the mechanisms you missed, revisit the official documentation where needed, and keep strengthening your exam-ready judgment. Thank you for practicing with WebLizard Cert Lab. You have completed the 8-video AI-103 Practice Exam Solution Series.